Hello everyone! In this video I want to share 3 ideas with big sentiment stamps and small image stamps. I chose Gerda Design stamp set. That's the one with the little koala bear. And it has those cute little koala bears and a few sentiments. And then I have those big sentiments from LETTERit. I love this big written script, and I want to share 3 ideas using those 2 stamp sets together. Okay, for my first card idea, I want to create a baby card. And for that, I'm starting out and stamping all the images from the stamp set. I'm actually stamping all the images for all 3 cards already on one sheet because I will do the coloring in one step. I'm stamping up with VersaFine black ink, and I'm using my Misty because I'm gonna double stamp this in order to make this really get a nice line. And then I'm using my watercolors to color those stamps. You can use any color medium you want for this, but since I'm not doing Copic markers or any other kind of markers, I'm usually always using my traditional watercolors to color my stamped images. I'm using this here too. Trying to get a little bit of shading going here. I'm starting on the outside and bringing the color in with water to the inside to give it a dimensional shape. And then I'm adding also a little heart onto this little cup, coffee cup. In that stamp set is also a little heart stamp that you could probably use, but I'm using this little, I just draw in my little hearts. I think that matches better with my watercolors. Then I'm starting out and coloring my little koala mommy that sits on the tree, or daddy. And the leaves I'm just coloring in on the inside on one edge with a dark sap green, and then I'm mixing my green with yellow and get a lighter green on the outside. And my koala, I'm gonna color it in gray. I'm using a mix of neutral tint and Payne's gray because I like my grays or my neutrals to have some kind of tone in it. So I'm usually go for the Payne's gray that has a little bit of blue in it. And again, I'm doing a little bit of shading on the outside, and then where the koala sits at the tree. And I'm giving him a little rosy cheek with a wet on wet technique here. And then I'm moving on to my other koala bear, and you can see I did already one that I didn't like. So I'm usually stamping my images once, twice or 3 times. If I'm coloring and I don't like the image, I can just grab the other one and try it over. And I'm going to use also this one for one of my cards. And again, I'm coloring the outside a little bit darker gray, and then moving the color into the inside of the koala to give him a little dimension. And he gets also a few rosy cheeks here. And then I'm coloring in the nose. I will color this later with a black marker. So one step I want to show you is I'm usually, when I color my images, I'm using this Distress Glaze from Tim Holtz. And I am actually just rubbing this over my images. That kinds of seals in the watercolor. You don't have to do it, and it gives a little bit of a shine. It's almost like it feels like a Vaseline, and it just helps to give this images a little bit of shine I would say. And then I'm using my Posca white marker and make the little highlights on the noses. So now for my first card, the background, I'm creating ink blending background. I'm using three Distress Oxide inks, broken china, peacock feather, and old paper. And I'm starting on one side, and I'm using these domed ink blending toppers from scrapbook.com. I really like those. I tried them now a couple of times, and I'm really amazed how much nicer my ink blending is going. Now I'm just ink blending this not straight but on different areas. I just want like a cloudy mixed background, nothing too straight. And then once it's done, I'm just gonna spritz some water on it to get this you know, this model effect or this dropping effect going. And I'm doing this twice. And just picking up the water with a paper towel, that leftover water. And then, as usual, I'm using my distress paint spray, and just splatter some white on top. And while that is drying, I'm stamping up my big sentiment here. I'm using the Welcome little one, and I'm stamping this also twice to get a nice crisp image there. And then I'm cutting out the Welcome, fussy cut it out, and almost in the shape of a cloud. And then I'm using my Distress Oxide in broken china and distress the edges so it matches the background. And then I'm attaching the little koala that sits on the tree to the right side of my sentiment with liquid glue. And then on the other side, I'm using the other tree branch and attaching that. And then I'm using my foam tape here. I'm adding pieces of foam tape to the back of it. And I'm using a die from my stash. It's the stitched edge rectangle die. Now with little 3D dots, I'm securing the little leaves to my background. And then I'm using my Nouveau Glaze and tracing the big Welcome script. This will give this word a nice 3D effect. Then I'm using some glue dots, crystal dots in blue, and also some white Nouveau drops. And here is the finished card, and here you can see how nice that Nouveau Glaze looks. And off camera, I also created a card for a girl. Now for the second card, I want to create a thank you card. And I'm using this little koala and the coffee cup for that. And then I'm stamping out the You Are Qualified for a Coffee. And I'm using my archival ink in the color coffee. And then I'm stamping with white pigment ink the big thanks on a piece of watercolor paper. And I cut this piece already to size with a die, so it fits nicely on an A2 card. And then I'm using a white embossing powder and emboss the big thanks. And then I'm using the little coffee cup and stamping it in white pigment ink all around that thanks sentiment. Just randomly making a little pattern. And I will also emboss this in white, and then here you go. And this gives me a nice base for a resist technique. So for this background, I'm using my Cosmic shimmer powders, and I chose some brown, yellow, and a little bit of light purple. And I'm starting out with my yellow and my light purple color, and I'm adding copper to the mix. Then I'm adding my water. And with this Cosmic shimmer powders, it's always kind of like experimenting and just you know, let the powders do the work for you. There's not much you can manipulate this, but what really helps is getting a big brush and just mix the colors that you want to mix, and picking up the color with a paper towel. So that way you can a little bit more specific place the color where you want. So what I did is in the middle, around that thanks, I chose a little bit more purple, and on the outside I went with more of the copper and the yellow color. Now when this is dry, I'm just using my archival ink in coffee and distress the edge. That keeps it all together. And then I'm adding this little cup to my little koala bear there. So cute. And I'm adding some foam tape in black. And then I'm adding a piece of fun foam to the back of that whole background. I want this to lift off the card a little bit. And then attaching this to my card base, which is a craft paper. And then I'm adding my koala bear right on top of that N, so it goes into this nook between the H and the K. And those other pieces, I'm just attach them on the bottom in kind of a zigzag pattern. And again, I'm using my Nuvo glaze here, and I'm tracing the thanks. This will again gives it a little bit more 3D dimension. And I'm adding some Nuvo drops in kind of a pinkish color, in white, in my Gold Coast. And yeah, this is the finished card. Oh yeah, and I add the Nuvo glaze also on the little nose of the koala. Okay, my third card idea is a congratulations card. And for this card, I chose again a piece of watercolor paper. And I glued this down with masking tape to my glass mat. And I'm using a stencil, and this stencil is from LETTERit as well. And it has this random confetti on it. And then I use modeling paste that is from Ranger. And I just add this to my stencil. And then I remove the stencil and wash it off immediately. And while this is drying, I will stamp out my sentiment. And for that, I'm using a piece of vellum that I cut to size. I made it wider than the width of my card. And I'm using the Hip Hip Hooray, You Did It. Then before I stamp this down with embossing ink, I use my powder tool on the vellum and give this a good press here to make sure I have a good impression. And then I am using 3 different embossing powders. And unfortunately, this didn't work out the way I wanted it. I wanted to be more gradient, but I used too much pink in the beginning, but I don't mind. I don't mind that at all. It looks nice how it is. And then I'm heat set this. And then, now that my background is dry and the embossing paste, I am adding the stencil again on top of my piece. And I'm using different gelatos in these colors. I think I used like a pink, a green, and this turquoise color, which is a metallic color. And I just rub this with my finger on top of the stencil. And my original goal was just to color the dots, but there was a little water seeping under my stencil. So what I think I'm going to do, or what I thought at that point, is like I will add more color to this. But I tested first my sentiment, and then I rip the top and the bottom of my sentiment to make sure that fits. And then I'm using again the same colors and wet them. And I actually use them now kind of like a watercolor. So I'm just using my brush and add water and randomly place the color on top where I have the same color dots. And I also splatter some of the paint. And I'm making sure I don't mix that pink too much with the greens, because this will create matte if you go too much, let that mix too much. And then I'm gonna dry this, and then I'm using again my Distress stain in white and just splatter it on top. And after trying this, I am using Hickory Smoke. It is kind of like a light gray, and to stretch the edge. And the reason why I use the gray is that my card base is gonna be gray, a gray card. So you can see how I attach the vellum now. I'm using my tape runner. I'm just attaching this on the back. And then I chose a little ribbon, baker twine in pink and white, and wrapped this around the bottom edge of my background here. And then I'm making a little bow. And I thought it would be a nice idea to do this because I want to set that little koala bear to the right side on top of this line. So I didn't want the koala to just like be there and have no hold. I wanted him to be grounded on something. So this line of the twine makes it easy for me to place the koala there. So it looks like he's walking on that line. Then I'm attaching as well fun foam to the back. So my card has a little bit of dimension. And then I'm attaching this to my gray card base. And then I'm stucking that little koala right there front of the hooray. And I'm using my Nouveau glaze and give the little nose a little glaze, and then adding some glitter drops and some white Nouveau drops. And here is the finished card. And here are all the cards again in close-up. I had so much fun creating those cards, and I hope you find this video inspiring, and maybe you have some big sentiment stamps and small images stamps in your stash and get inspired to use them. I hope I see you in my next video. And until then, have a great time, and I see you then. Bye.